are again probably the most exciting webinar in webinar history. Is it the most exciting webinar in webinar history, Christina?
Yes, it is.
It absolutely is. Mona?
I would have to agree.
And you even have no history here, so it has to be the most exciting webinar in webinar history. It's time for, you heard it, you've seen it, you may have seen it if you were there, NanoMojo. NanoMojo, our first collaborative release, a co-branded super supplement, and I say super with all intended superness, between Quicksilver Scientific and Sunhorse Energy. Which brings me to my fine, distinguished, scholarly, erudite, and very talkative co-host here, Dan Moriarty. Not Dean Moriarty, Dan Moriarty.
Chris, great honor to be here with you, and I really am so excited about this. It's wonderful.
Oh,
I just want to thank everybody for this.
Absolutely. Now, Dan comes here through our relationship with a couple of guys down in the Encinitas area, specifically Tom Arts, who is the kingpin of all things dietary supplement oriented. And while bowing to his ring one day, he introduced me to a supplement called not called NanoMojo, it's called Mojo 8.5. And Mojo 8.5 was a business that was coming together as a collaboration between between Dan Moriarty and Tom O'Brien. Now you guys, many of you know Tom O'Brien, the Gluten King, the Gluten Summit Master from IFM, and he is not able to be with us here because he is in Chicago, and we decided that the feed back and forth would be a little bit of a hassle, so we have Dan. And Mojo is the genius work of Dan Moriarty, a result of 30 years as an herbalist?
Well, since the 70s, so it's actually a little over 40 years now that I've been working continuously with herbs and adaptogenic herbs in the class.
And Mojo's been about 8 years?
Mojo and our original formula, which is called Ultimate Energy, is going on about 10 years now. But Mojo actually is a little newer. Mojo is for the last 3.5 years for the Mojo.
All right, so Dan has been working in herbs for over 30 years. Oh, since the 70s. Jesus, that's like 46 years.
Yeah, I'm
that makes like I was just getting born around then, 69. All right. So as long as I've been on this earth, Dan's been working on herbals. And longer than that, his mother's been working on herbals, so he's the second generation or third. So
my grandmother was actually the one that taught my mom, and they're Hungarians. If anybody knows anything about Hungarians, they're really big on herbs, and my mom was definitely no exception. But I got to tell you that that story we wouldn't be talking about that if it was just up to my mom, because nobody ever wakes up one day and decides to do what their parents do for work. At least I didn't. We'll talk about that if you want.
We will get into that. So just as the overview of how we got here. So I met Dan, Tom Arts, and Tom O'Brien, and they handed me this supplement called Mojo 8.5. Now, Mojo 8.5 was like a who's who of the greatest adaptogenic herbs on the planet. I was very impressed with it, and I liked it a lot, but if any of you know me, I won't rest until that darn thing is in a nanoparticle, and I did not. So my first discussion with Dan came about 5 minutes after dropping Mojo into a nanoparticle, and I took it, and Dan went through me going through successive layers of unfolding of the adaptogen experience, during which Dan gave the play-by-play of what was happening in my cells. Was that a good conversation?
Best phone call I ever got was Chris had just like he said, just minutes before, taken the first attempt at putting the herbs, the adaptogenic herbs that represent NanoMojo, into a liposome. It's the first time it's ever been done. And he calls me on the telephone. And I'm literally live on the telephone listening to the master of liposomal delivery tell me about my product that I've been working on, and it was so exciting. I get goosebumps right now thinking about it. It was that amazing.
We have visual confirmation on the goosebumps. It was such a good time, and Dan and I were just locked in this talk about all this adaptogens and delivery systems, and Dan had been looking for a delivery system. He'd been looking for that unilamellar liposome that we talk about all the time, and we had just finished development of the bitters number 9 and just figured out how to get complex herbals into a delivery like this, this is the first time on earth that this kind of complexity of herbal delivery has happened, and it's exciting.
It's amazing, and you know, Chris kudos to Chris, because let me tell you, I didn't think it could be done. I honestly didn't, because I've struggled so long, and basically my whole life's work and my vision has been trying to make something that is really, really accessible to the cells. And so I didn't think that the formula that I had as a resonance formulation could be put into a liposome. So you are like a master magician, but coupled with the best science on the planet, to be able to put such a there's so many moving parts in this formula that to get it into a unilaminar liposome of the size that Chris has done, I think it's a miracle. I really do.
So, you know I love liposomes, you know I love getting complex payloads into these little things, but you are going to love today's webinar because we're going to go through this master list of ingredients here and unleash the full fury of Dan's knowledge about adaptogens, and it is mind-blowing every time it happens. So let's just, get through a couple of basics and just get through, what are adaptogens? Dan, what's an adaptogen?
Well, let's just go to the basics on the subject. The definition of adaptogens was first coined and first put together by Nikolai Lazarev back in the 1930s. So we're not reinventing the wheel here, so we're just going to say what it is. Adaptogens, number one, it's a three-part definition, non-toxic. And the benefit of non-toxic is that pretty much everybody can take it. That's the neat thing about it.
And I can take a lot?
You can take a lot. Right. You can take up to 9 grams per kilo of the actual herbs without any toxicity whatsoever. A 100-kilo person would be eating a couple of pounds before you'd ever get to toxic levels. So that's a lot. The second part is that they work at the cellular level, and you and I, and our audience obviously knows. We all know, everybody knows that we're made of cells, right? So it stands to reason that a healthy cell is going to make a healthy you. And that's actually what we say, healthy cells, healthy you. And so for the purpose of this definition, they work at the cellular level, and what they do is they help the cells of our bodies actually resist stress at the cellular level. Can't say enough about how important that is for stress. We can't get rid of stress in our lives, as you well know, but we can accommodate for stress.
Accommodating stress. I mean, that's a great thing. So often in what we do in natural medicine is a reflection of what we do in allopathic medicine, where we're trying to push something down. We're saying, stress bad, push it down, take some drugs, boom, I'm out, it doesn't stress me out anymore. That's not really true. You have to be able to come to accommodate stress, which is when we talk about detoxification, we talk about resistance to metals. We talk about turning up the cell's ability to resist the onslaught of the metal. Be able to always accommodate, pick the metal together with the glutathione, get it out of the body.
Absolutely.
So here we're talking about HPA axis, being able to take stress, and instead of having massive cortisol spikes and all the disruption to the body, big opening of nitric oxide, opening of perfusion and sweat, and it's not always the perfusion that you want. And instead of having that out-of-hand reaction, blunting that. So it's just the appropriate amount of cortisol, appropriate amount of stress reactions.
Exactly. Let's think about stress a little different here, and it's perfectly explained by Chris. But think of a violin, G, D, A, and E. You have 4 strings, right? And they have to be tuned correctly. If you have too much stress, you're going to break your violin. You're going to fold it up like a cheap suitcase. If you don't have enough stress, you're not going to get any music. It's just going to be loose strings flopping on the fingerboard.
That's right.
So people have to understand stress is part of life. We need stress. We just don't need to overreact to the stress.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so, recently I just got back from Autism 1, and I was talking a lot about parasympathetic, sympathetic reactions and overexpression of the glutamate receptors. And so we get to talk about glutamate and sympathetic reactions, and we start to think that's bad, and we have to damp that down, and we have to push GABA up. But glutamate's responsible for all of your memory, all of your diligence, all of your being able to be on it. But when it gets out of hand, that's when it starts chewing up your brain. So
Absolutely.
We need to bring things down. And I was talking a lot about CBD and hemp and all the adaptogenic properties of that.
How many genes are affected? It's just amazing.
Oh yeah,
many lifetimes.
I'll show you that paper. 500 or 600 up, 500 or 600 down, excess glutamate down, hypofunctional glutamate up, brought to the middle. And that's what we're trying to do here.
And we're really only on the second part of the definition. The most important part that I think people really need to understand is that adaptogens, as a class of herbs, they help our bodies achieve balance.
Yeah.
Or
Which
if
is
you want to use the term homeostasis, right? But let's think about it this way. You know, our body is like a general contractor. Okay, so think about a general contractor. You check his credentials, you check his references. You even go by and you look at a house he built and you go, my God, that's a great place. It's just fantastic. So you hire him, right? And the day of the job starts, he shows up on a bicycle. Okay, so you're like, okay, job start. Guy's on a bike. Where's your truck? Don't have a truck. Where's your tools? Don't have any tools. Okay, well, where's your helpers? Well, I didn't bring any helpers. Okie dokie. Didn't I check on your reference? Didn't you? Oh, yeah, I know how to build a house. Well, he does know how to build a house. The problem is no truck, no tools, no helpers. The house isn't going to get built. So with adaptogens, you are giving your body what it needs. And as a general contractor idea, analogy, our bodies know what to do with that, Chris. They know what to do. So the last part of this is helping our bodies achieve balance. So we've given our body what amounts to an incredible toolbox that is just unbelievable. Adaptogens are the most researched class of herbs on this planet.
Yeah.
They are, without a doubt, the most researched herbs.
And that's an interesting thing with the research. The research is going back into the 30s. It's always interesting when you talk about it. You talk about how much of the research was done by the Russians trying to make their soldiers perform better, their workers perform better, and a good amount of that research is still classified. Right?
Absolutely, yes. You know, Nikolai Lazaroff and his associate later, his associate Israel Breckman, they were actually put to work by the Russian government to find substances that were endemic. That means in the Russian territory that could be used to help their soldiers, their contract workers, and things like that. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, because in Russia they don't use rats. They use people. Okay, so these studies are not rat studies. They're not mouse studies. These are people. Give me 1,200 contract workers for mines. Got them. Give me a bunch of truck drivers. Got them. Give me a bunch of soldiers. We got them. I mean, the Russians, when they say we want 1,000 people for a study, they got it. So when they studied adaptogens, they were doing the scope of their studies are phenomenal. They literally cover thousands and thousands of people per study. So these, when I say the most heavily studied and chronicled class of herbs ever.
So talk about that early research. What is it they were doing to these people and the responses that they were getting from them? Because when I was reading the literature on this, they were talking about being able to perform under stress, able to continue while under a stress load.
They were stressed beyond words. Now, we can go into history. Everybody's heard of some of the terrible things in the Second World War.
Can we say gulag?
I could say that. And my mom, as I mentioned, is Hungarian, and our whole family on my mother's side was basically ejected from Europe during the Nazi days. So no love lost there. But the bottom line is this: the Russians. Let me ask you a simple question. They started out being attacked, and then they wound up being the first to Berlin. Stalingrad, which was a terrible war, a terrible battle, fought to the rubble, right, against the best of the German armies. What the difference was is that these people couldn't be stopped because they were living on nothing for rations and under the worst conditions ever, yet they had adaptogens. They had already developed adaptogenic supplementation for their soldiers. Later on, they used them for their cosmonauts, who, by the way, was first in space. Not that I'm a big fan of Russia by any means, but you have to just, history is history. Sputnik. Sputnik got up there first. It was the first thing up there. Then they put people up there. And they discovered something that is part of why Sunhorse and why you and I are working with something so important. They discovered that people need to be connected to the planet. This is kind of the essence of the thought behind global resonance formulation. When they discovered the Schumann wave, which was this emanation that results in energy that's in the atmosphere being organized as it is in an actual pulsation of 7.83 hertz, the Russians realized that people need this connectivity to the Earth itself. Our alpha brainwave signature is 7.83 hertz, no accident. Right? So this is an amazing concept. They put their cosmonauts in space. they gave them a transmitter, a transponder on the spaceships that actually broadcast at 7.83 hertz, and they were fine. If they turned it off, they immediately started to lose their mentality. They were not able to function. They couldn't hit the right buttons. It was amazing.
So the Schumann resonance was part of that early research?
Yes.
And the research on adaptogens and the way that you link into that?
I linked it because Schumann discovered resonance. You know, he discovered this resonance frequency that humans have to have, because if we don't have this frequency, this connectivity, our mentality doesn't, we don't work, our brain doesn't work right. So I realized, this is interesting, I don't know if this is what you want to talk about this very moment, but everything has an energetic value. Everything has an energetic value. So with that in mind, being able to achieve this connectivity to our world, to the people around us, to our families, to everything that we have to be connected. And that connectivity was what spurred my early work into figuring out the energetic values, the different types of energetic values that each herb within the class of adaptogens represented, and working a lineal formula to maximize bioactivity.
So here you have this idea that he had of that stems back to the Russian ideas of how to link everybody into earth energy. And when you read through these ingredients, you're going to see major classes being geographic classes. You're going to see a group of herbs from South America, a group from the Indian subcontinent, Indo-Tibetan, and then you're going to see a group of herbs that are Asian. A lot of these you recognize, some of them might be a little bit new, but here you have Dan's 20 years in adaptogens, 8 years specifically on how to harmonize each of these into these formulas. And you won't be disappointed by the result. And the 8 that I took earlier when you said that they're non-toxic is a little strong. So
2 is the recommendation.
That being said, well, you said it was non-toxic.
Yeah,
so
sure.
What I'm going to do here, I'm going to drop back into the literature a little bit because we're used to doing that. We're in the functional medicine world. And what I love about this is we've got, everybody talks about east-west blends, but really we have a blend of older wisdom and a blend of newer wisdom. And the older wisdom goes all the way back to, how long has the Ayurvedic system been around?
4,000 plus years.
4,000 plus years, into TCM, which is several thousand years, into European herbalism, South American herbalism, then bringing that through the lens of the early scientific research of the Russians, looking to make a stronger workforce and fighting force, and then through to some of the biochemistry today, and that's what we're used to looking at. So a lot of you will want to say, well, what's the mechanism for this? And so we're going to look at some of the mechanisms. Some of these, the only ones that have really been laid out so far are the stress control mechanisms.
That's true.
They don't really understand the energy generation mechanisms all that well, but let's at least look at some of the stress generation mechanisms. All right, so here was a study on rabbits, not on mice, even though I say inflicted on mice. This was rabbits. They weren't quite like the Russians. They didn't just line up the 1,000 people and make them go through this. So on rabbits, this is adaptogens rhodiola and schizandra modify the response to immobilization stress. Immobilization stress is they hold the damn rabbits down and they freak out. And, it would happen to you. It's like being, under a pile of 10 people, you start freaking out a little bit. So suppressing the increase of phosphorylated stress-activated protein kinase. So there's a gene response turning up a master switch that results in a cascade of downstream reactions that are stress response related, such as high nitric oxide expression, which makes perfusion out to the outside. That's hopefully so that you can run away, and high cortisol. So before giving them immobilization stress, they either gave them a placebo or one of 6 different adaptogens, and then they measured all of these different responses. Now, it was interesting up at the beginning, this could have been Dan talking up at the beginning. You look at their introduction. The term adaptogen was coined in the middle 20th century by the Russian scientist Lazarov to describe medicinal plants that are able to enhance the so-called, quote, state of non-specific resistance of an organism to stress. Non-specific resistance. And so they cite 3 things. They've got to have stress protective effects. They've got to be slightly stimulating, from both single and multiple. I can tell you right now that single works, having just done 8 of those. And they must be innocuous, meaning non-toxic. All right. So, here we have on the left. Now, unfortunately, they used all the same colors, so it looks like you're looking at the same thing. But on the left, you're looking at the response of the rabbit's biochemistry to the immobilization stress. So, in the red there, that's it's a stress-related protein kinase. Then the blue next to it is nitric oxide. That big light blue spike is the cortisol. Now they looked at a couple other things to see, if they changed, like testosterone, PGE2, and those other enzymes there on the right. None of those really changed. What you see is this kinase go way up, nitric oxide go way up, and cortisol go way up. All right. Now, as far as turning off the gene-related protein kinase, over on the right you see the placebo, the rhodiola, rhodioliside, Schisandra chinensis.
Schisandra chinensis.
Yep. Let's just get ourselves a little highlighter here.
There you go.
Highlighter. There's the rhodiola, Schisandra, Eleutherococcus senticosus, also called Siberian ginseng, Panax ginseng, and what's B. alba?
B. albicans.
B. albicans.
Yeah, I don't use it in the formula, but it obviously, you can see from the chart, absolutely has an effect.
Well, what you see now, all these were bringing down the red one here. And the only ones that brought that down are the rhodiola and the Schisandra. All right, so rhodiola and Schisandra, we see work from this higher signaling cascade that comes out of the HPA axis, and that's the kinase there. Now let's look at the effects on the ones that we think of more. I gotta erase my drawings here. All right, so now on the left was that chart. You see the protein kinase go up, the NO and the cortisol here. And over on the right, you see the result of the adaptogens pre-exposing the rabbits to adaptogens for nitric oxide. You see over on the left, the nitric oxide went up to 200%. That's the placebo there. Draw that across. Every single adaptogen minimized the expression of nitric oxide. They lowered that stress response. Every single adaptogen strongly lowered the response of cortisol. The weakest of that was the albicans. So you see rhodiola rosea, Schisandra, Eleutherococcus, and Panax ginseng. Every one of those diminish that stress response.
As a class, that's exactly what
As a class, that is exactly what they do. So there we see some pretty data on that. And so we know that that's a big part of what's going on. All right. So top one was nitric oxide, bottom one's cortisol. All right, just one or two other things taken out of the literature. Evidence-based efficacy of adaptogens in fatigue and molecular mechanisms related to their stress protective activity. So they're saying improved attention, cognitive function, and mental performance in fatigue and chronic fatigue syndrome, meaning you take tired organisms or chronically tired organisms and it brings them up and it makes them able to work with more diligence.
Amazing.
But without speeding them out and
Absolutely.
without burning out their adrenals.
Absolutely.
So adaptogens, they say, can be defined as a pharmacological group of herbal preparations that increase tolerance to mental exhaustion and enhance attention and mental endurance in situations of decreased performance. Again, under stress, you act like you're not under stress.
Exactly.
And then they go on to talk about the mechanisms. So stress protective effective adaptogens related to regulation of homeostasis. First thing we said, via several mechanisms of action associated with the HPA axis. There's this stress sensor protein called the HSP70, which inhibits expression of NO synthase and interacts with glucocorticoid receptors directly, affecting levels of circulating cortisol and nitric oxide. and prevention of stress and increased NO and the associated decrease in ATP production. So this is something that hasn't really been addressed much from what I hear, is that when cortisol goes up and nitric oxide goes up, you have this flush of blood,
Yes.
and that would in Chinese medicine, that would be like a spilling of the qi.
Yep.
The qi is not focused.
Yep, not focused.
Blood is not focused, qi is not focused, and there is a measurable decrease in ATP production.
Absolutely.
So you freak out,
Which is the
you flush
fuel.
out, and you make no fuel.
Exactly.
That's why you can't perform under stress.
Let's talk about that for a second, Chris.
Yep.
My past includes about 20 years of martial arts. I'm a black belt in judo and also in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I'm a competitor in both. And I've taught many students at very high levels. I studied under Carlson Gracie. I went to Brazil and trained down there. And I will tell you right now, in my experience, there's not much more stress than going into a tournament with professionals that know what they're doing. It's stressful. And no matter how many times I've done it, and no matter how many times my students have done it, you don't lose that butterfly feeling. You don't lose that, oh my God, you're just like, you're on edge. I will tell you right now, I have tested the formulas that are represented in NanoMojo under extreme conditions, people competing at the highest level. I'm talking world champion level in Jiu-Jitsu and Judo. And I've also tested it on my own children who are national champions in Judo. And so I'm telling you right now, when we go out into life, when we're in the real world, right? It's a battle. We always hear about it's a fight, it's a war. I mean, what is it? Well, it's not like we're out there in a tournament, but let's face it. We have emotional stress, we have physical stress, we have financial stress, we have God knows how many kinds of stress going on here. We have to have a lower response to that stress, or we're going to burn ourselves out.
Yeah, and not spill the qi.
Not spill the qi.
So you give the adaptogens before you go into the tournament.
Absolutely.
You may get the flutters, but you don't spill the qi all into the periphery.
And you have to go through 4, sometimes up to 6 matches. And in Jiu-Jitsu, if you lose one match, you're out. You're not going to win the tournament. There's no double elimination. One match, you're out. So you cannot lose. So it's not a matter of winning your first match. I won the first match. Okay, well now you got to win the second match.
Keep it going.
Now you got to win the third match. Oh, now you got to win the fourth match. Oh, guess what? Now we got to go in and win the 5th match. And you know what? The attrition, the wear and tear on the mind as well as the body. The guy that can stay calm and that can do what Jiu-Jitsu is all about. It's called gentle way because, well, it's gentle on me, not gentle on you. Okay, so let's just
because you have to have a gentle inner environment.
Yes, you need to be able to adapt and
can't let stress take you and take over. And you got to control your energy. Don't spill the qi.
Right.
And it's the same thing when you go out into the world every day. Because we do that, we get stressed out, we spill the qi.
Absolutely.
What do? Go for the espresso. And then soon you're burning out the whole organism.
Right, and you cannot rely on these things. Like everything that we do has a place, right? And I personally like coffee. I don't mind coffee.
Yeah.
1 cup in the morning, and if I have another cup, that might be a big day for me. But honestly, it's really not that there's anything intrinsically wrong with a phytochemistry like a stimulant alkaloid like caffeine. In small amounts, it's okay. But if we're relying on that, what we're doing is we're burning the candle at both ends. You mentioned ATP production, and that's where you get to the cellular level. What NanoMojo brings as benefits is that it actually, and I cannot tell you how happy I am to see the adaptogenic formula, the global resonance formulation, put into such a masterful formula as what you've done here with Quicksilver Scientific. I'm telling you right now, I don't get impressed easy when it comes to working with adaptogens. I've worked with them for 40 years, and I am stoked. I get the biggest grin on my face.
Because it's so fast.
Oh my God, it's so much fun. You can walk into a room full of people. I mean, I like fun, guys. Listen, this can't not be fun. It has to be fun in some respect.
Bottle of Mojo in a party is always fun.
Oh my God. You can go around, there could be 50 people, and I am not kidding. Where is it? Is there a Mojo around here?
There's a Mojo.
Oh my God. There could be 50 people, okay, in the party, which is a small to medium-sized party, depending on where you're going and who you're hanging out with. But you can go around and give every single one of them something that is going to change their life, straight up. And I have done it, and I have had the feedback come back from these people. I never get tired of it. It's just a blast.
All right. back to this. Mental and behavioral disorders. Did Dan and I have mental and behavioral disorders? Well, we like to have fun, and that's for sure. And I didn't even realize I put this one in there. Must have been one of those subconscious accidents, but evidence for stress protective and stimulating effects. Managing mental and behavioral disorders. I mean, calming down, as I said, with the cannabinoids, calming down the hyperactivity of glutamate in the brain. The neuroendocrine system is what they're targeting as the effects of the adaptogens. So if you're controlling cortisol's wildness, you're also controlling other neurotransmitters and endocrine molecules. You are bringing them into order and stability. And I tell you, I've been at a couple conferences recently, and the thing I found just constant was that people's brains were frazzled. There was a glutamate excess going on. I couldn't get them stable, and I couldn't work on them unless I started first by giving them some CBD, calm the inflammation, then giving them Mojo to create coherence and clarity.
You know,
one after another, after another, after another.
I'll tell you, I mentioned it, but I'm going to mention it again. What Chris is talking about here could very well be a breakthrough for people like what we just mentioned. This is unbelievable, and I'm going to just bring this out quite simply. My daughter has a complex seizure disorder, which is a very serious condition, and I'm always trying various formulations, which involve, in this case, CBD. But I did in a crude fashion what Chris has done in absolutely stellar fashion, and that is I took the CBD concentrate and I used it in conjunction with the NanoMojo, and amazingly, the effect was, number one, quick, number two, very, very, I would have to say, you know, when you're talking about the receptor sites, the CB2 receptor sites, which are all over the body in every single organ system, and definitely a nerving action, you know, in being able to keep that cross-firing and that disconnect from from happening.
So using the CB2, or using the cannabidiol to calm down the electrical activity, both centrally and peripherally.
It's just amazing. So, you know, the adaptogens, what Chris and I are working on, something that you people are really the first to hear about, and that is there is a delivery system here that Chris and Quicksilver Scientific have, coupled with another innate delivery system, which is based on the category of the herbs that have cellular access. So what we're looking at here, what we're trying to discuss with you, is that we have something that will propel the effects, just like a rocket booster puts a payload into space by overcoming gravity. We have overcome a number of challenges in putting together a delivery system that brings adaptogenic benefits to people at a level never before seen.
Well, here we go. Adaptogens, increasing lifespan and stress resistance, and C. elegans. You know what C. elegans is?
No.
It's a tiny little worm, but at least we made it longer. And if we could make a worm live longer, then maybe it'll work on us too. But why do they have increased lifespan? And it's mostly through control of that system. The HPA system, keeping that from going sideways, keeping stress from going up and down, and that relieves, you know, and I love to term it in Chinese medicine, just keeping the qi controlled during times of stress.
Could we say keeping the worm from going sideways? I like that.
Keeping the worm from going sideways. All right, so let's talk about NanoMojo. Here's the label for it. You see that co-branding between Sunhorse and Quicksilver, and there's this big list of all these different ingredients on there. And you're going to see, like I said, South American herbs like maca and acai, Tibeto-Indian herbs like goji, rhodiola, and then your traditional Chinese ones like astragalus and ginseng and reishi. And I'd like to go through a little bit of all of these and spill your brain of all the knowledge. So first we're going to talk about the Mojo part, and of course then we'll talk about the Nano part. So the Mojo part, global resonance formulation, like I said, these areas from all over the world, and as Dan elucidated before, he's looking to connect us in to the whole earth, hence the global resonance formulation.
You know, I mean, we're a global people these days. You know, you can jump on a plane, 18 hours later we're in the Philippines. And that, that is rather new in the human experience. So endemic herbs have always been used by people in a specific area, and they are very beneficial in that respect. But I'm going out a little bit on a limb here, but I'm going to tell you this: that the earth is a giant energy source. You can take a plant grown at 12,000 feet, 11,000 feet, something like maca, with the soil that it's actually grown in. You can move it to another part of the earth and put it at the same altitude and bring the same soil that it grew in before, and you will get a different energetic effect from that plant. Now, why is that? That's been intriguing me for so many years. So global resonance formulation starts to take this into effect. Now, I'm a pilot, and everybody that's ever been a pilot or is a pilot knows about isogonic lines. Iso meaning equal, and gravity meaning the gonic part of it. So there's equal gravitational pull. If you look at these lines, they curve through the earth in a circular or in a curvy fashion, and basically those are equal gravitational effects. I'm convinced that the earth is, as an entirety, something that we should take into effect in our formulas. And so when I'm working with a class of herbs, like I've dedicated my life to do in adaptogens, I wanted to take in the fact that this is a round earth with very, very great big energetic capability, and that people from all around the world can use NanoMojo. This is a global formula. It's not going to work better here than it works there. It's going to work good everywhere.
Yeah, there used to be some theories around herbal use where you were supposed to just eat stuff from your local environment. And I like that you broke that, and I really believe that it's true, that we have to take the best from the whole world. And one of the great things, we didn't really tell you the long-term story of Mojo, but Dan had started by selling something that was his herbal concentrates diluted in water to these half-gallon bottles, and then realized that, geez, I'm shipping these herbs from all across the world.
Heavy.
I'm putting a whole bunch of water in them, and I'm shipping them back all over the world. This is a big carbon footprint.
That's it.
He went down from there to the concentrate, and still there, we're taking herbs from all around the world, making concentrates, put them in bottles, and then ship them back all over the world. And from there to NanoMojo, we got to the smallest bottle, but it's not just the smallest bottle. We're only about 40% of that, 40% by volume of this is that herbal blend. And you were taking about a fifth to an eighth of the dose that you were taking before.
I'm blown away.
And having
I love it.
as much or greater effect.
I love it. And
so we're at least minimizing our carbon footprint
Absolutely.
while we participate in a global herbal economy.
And not sacrificing efficacy or bioactivity. I tell you right now that this is quite simply a breakthrough. This is without a doubt a global breakthrough, because I have worked with these herbs for 40 years. I have seen what they've done. I have seen indigenous peoples and how they use them, and I'm familiar with the concentration levels that I've experienced myself. And bringing it, like you said, from the ready to drink, which was 64 ounces, down to 100 milliliters for a 30-day supply, which means you were taking 3.3 milliliters per day. Okay, 3.3 milliliters per day. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a 0.5 milliliter press, right? So you're taking 2 of these in a day. That's 1 milliliter. So we're 300% more effective just at that level, not even withstanding the fact that the speed, the efficacy,
and then it's only 40%.
Yes,
herbal.
It's a mind-boggling.
So you're about 8-fold up.
But also think about this. We all know this, Chris. I'm sure you'll agree that when we take stuff in through our GI tract, I would say 70 to 80 to 90% of it is degraded into its original metabolites or even other metabolites.
Oh yeah.
But when you are using Mono Nano, you are literally putting this into your bloodstream, and the size of the particle is incredibly small, 40 nanometers, give or take. Is that right? Okay, so what that means for everybody out there in a simple term is the smaller the particle, the longer it's going to stay in your system, and the more it's going to be absorbed into the cells. The cells are where we want to get this, folks. We don't want it. It's like, okay, you're driving down the freeway and you see a truck that says Home Depot. hey, I need a 2x4. Well, none of us are going to try to stop that 18-wheeler to get a 2x4.
Yeah.
We're just not going to do that. We're going to go to Home Depot. We're going to go to the rack says 2x4 and pull one out. That's what we're going to do. The same thing with this. Having it in our bloodstream, having something rolling around, a big, large molecule just rolling around our bloodstream,
Yeah.
guess what our liver does to that thing when it comes
Yeah.
by? Bye-bye. So, that's like seeing an 18-wheeler go by and you want a 2x4. You can't get it, right? It has to be in the right category. It has to be there, ready to use, and that's what this is. These elements are now available for the internal workings of the cell.
The phospholipids.
Hello.
All right.
Beautiful.
Now we're going to get into all the ingredients in this. And at first, in some formulas like this, I look at a list of ingredients like this and I say, all right, they just want to have the who's who of all the stuff in there, but is this really been harmonized? And it was really as I got to work with Dan and look at why and how he uses every one of these and then feel the effect of them brought together, that I saw how awesome it was. But every single one of these alone is awesome. And so probably if we go, we're going to kind of go through orders of importance in here, but one of the biggest and strongest adaptogens in the world is gynostemma, or juglans.
Yeah.
And this is one of your faves in here, isn't it?
I absolutely think so. Gynostemma pentaphyllum, but sometimes known as jugulin, if you can excuse my pronunciation, is amazing stuff. You have to remember that ginseng, Panax ginseng, which is probably the most well-known adaptogen. It's pretty much the premier name adaptogen. Anybody would recognize it, even if they don't even know about adaptogen. When you say gynostemma, now you're somewhere that's quite different. You have to remember that the Chinese Materia Medica goes back 2,500 years or so, 1,800 to 2,500, we're not sure how long. It does not include gynostemma, and you wonder why. Well, studying peoples will get you a long way. My mom would always tell me about this. You have to look at people and how they do things and what's really going on. And so in my studies of peoples, indigenous peoples, I come across these people years ago that were known as the Miao people in China. They're very colorful folks. You could do a whole webinar just on these people. Quite impressive herbalists in their own right. They drank gynostemma tea, and this is what they're really famous for. It was like a poor man's, ginseng, if you want to call it that. And they actually developed a word, and don't ask me the name of this word, I can't speak Chinese, but it's not genetic that these people are this healthy. It is not a genetic superiority that they have. When their children would move away from the area and would no longer have access to this gynostemma, they had a word for when their kids would come back 10 years later, they would look older than their parents. Now the Chinese government got a hold of this and they said, we have a longevity pocket here. What is this? Why are these people living 100 years? Why do they live much longer than 100 years sometimes? What's going on? So they tore into that, and lo and behold, they verified and vindicated the efficacy of this herb, which has really got the top place in my formula, because think about it from a phytochemistry standpoint. Ginsenosides, which are these supposed active ingredients. There are many more than we just talked about, but the ginsenosides in ginseng, Panax ginseng, about 23 ginsenosides. Okay. The japanosides and ginsenosides in jugulin, which is the gynostemma, there's over 80. Over 80. Now, if you're talking about a toolbox,
broader spectrum.
In one plant, if you got a toolbox, well, it's like if you buy a socket set. You pay so much for a 20-piece socket set, right? Okay. Now you go to the 80-piece socket set. We all know we pay more for that. And it's not about what you pay, it's what you get. And so gynostemma, I feel, is like, it's kind of like the first stage on the rocket booster. You light that stuff off in Mojo Nano, and you have got power. You've got power to burn. And so from there, we build that resonance, we build that lineal focus and that momentum for our bodies to get the adaptogenic benefits.
So jugulins is the primary fuel, the number one.
It's the kicker.
And was this used in the Russians? Did the Russians use jugulin?
Actually they did not, because they were not aware of it. That's the thing about adaptogenic plants in the category. There are literally thousands of beneficial plants until you even hit one adaptogen.
Yep.
They're hard to find.
Right.
Very rare. I forgot to say that, but they are very rare.
And Lazarev was tasked with finding all of
Absolutely,
these.
and he did a great job.
And was Eleuthero his first, or did he
Yes,
start
that's-
with ginseng?
No, he started knowing what ginseng would do, but
Okay.
the Russians did not control the ginseng harvest.
So they had to find
They
their
were
own.
trying to find something else. So Eleuthero, or Siberian ginseng, which is without a doubt the most well-researched herb that, to my knowledge, on the planet.
Yes.
Okay, he found that. Then the rhodiola, and then we have another one called Raponticum carthamoides, which is an amazing herb, and on from there. You get into these endemic adaptogens,
Right.
and so they did really, really well. And by the way, some of these adaptogens, Rhodiola rosea and the Raponticum, they have survived the Ice Age. They are on both sides of the Ice Age, right? And so from a botanist standpoint, and a phytochemistry standpoint, how adaptive are they? They are pretty darn
They're pretty
adaptive.
tough.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right, so Eleuthero, that was Lazarev's first jewel, wasn't
That's right, and he did well. And they frankly should have retired the man after that. But they said, knowing that the Russians are like this. Good job, Nikolai.
Make
Go
it
out
get
and
us
find another one.
All
Okay,
right.
so he did, and amazingly, he found something else. And then they weren't satisfied with that. They
What did he
said,
find after that?
Well, he found the rhodiola. He found what they call marl root, which is Raponticum carthamoides, right?
Right.
Okay, and then of course the Schisandra, which
Right.
is also endemic to those areas
Right.
there. So he did. I mean, the man deserves a place in the world simply because of his elucidating the
Yes.
effects of adaptogens, quantifying and creating this class of definitions of which certain herbs can only fit. Not every herb can be an adaptogen. It could have even adaptogenic properties in one respect or not, but unless it has all three
Right.
of those things that we mentioned,
Right.
it's not a true adaptogen.
Now, and in the more modern biochemistry, they're looking at how many different aspects of the stress cascade these adaptogens block.
Whoa.
And the three that had the broadest, all the way top down, not just the peripheral stuff, but in the stress blocking cascade, it was the Eleutherococcus, it was the Schisandra, and the rhodiola.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so Schisandra, tell us about Schisandra.
Well, Schisandra is quite amazing. It in traditional Chinese medicine, it's used a lot, and it also exists in the Russian environment because you have to remember they share similar environments in the northern area.
Right.
It's called the five-flavored berry, and what they say about this is that the flavor that you taste tells them how your body is working.
So it's diagnostic.
Exactly, and it really because you mentioned it really has these incredible adaptogenic effects, which, by the way, have been verified and vindicated by everybody from herbalists and traditional medicine people all the way to people in big pharma. They know about it too. It's quite impressive. So Schisandra has these undisputable benefits, and the five-flavored berry is in our formula because of the balancing and harmonizing effect that it has. It's like, let's face it, when you get into engines, everybody's heard of balanced and blueprinted, right? What does that mean? It means that engine is perfectly balanced. It doesn't have any out of balance parts. It's not weighted wrong, so that as you rev up to like unbelievable RPMs, it doesn't just blow up from the centrifugal force of an unbalanced machine. Well, that's like our bodies. We have a lot of moving parts here. They all have to work together. The thing about adaptogens as a way to keep ourselves healthy, we want to keep our bodies running like a balanced and blueprinted physiological machine. And Schisandra is one of the major balancers that I've found.
And Mona was mentioning that it's seen to be nervine and calming in a hyper state, and it's found to be stimulating in a depressed state.
It's
so
incredible.
They're bringing to the center. Now I'm wondering, in looking through the literature, I didn't find this. And I suspect it may just be by calming the chaos in the neuroendocrine system that it does this. But in toning and bringing everything together, have you seen research on it in terms of cell signaling and ways that it makes the body work together? Or does the body want to work together from the get-go, and the stress and the chaos, the neuroendocrine chaos during stress, is what throws us off?
Well, the question is a good one. And, it's like a chicken and egg question.
Yeah,
it really is. And, we are not alone in trying to find these answers, Chris. There are, I will have to say in my case, a lot smarter people than me looking into this. However, I will tell you this, that if something has been working and has been utilized and incredibly documented, like in traditional Chinese medicine,
Right.
for literally thousands of years, right? Our whole allopathic medicine system is not even 200 years old. So you're looking at something that has been used by humans with great effect for these exact purposes, right?
Right.
Now, when you ask how it's done and what is the actual mechanism
I have
of
to
that,
ask.
well, you have to ask, but I'm going to have to tell you, it's like God is great. I don't know what to
All
say.
right, what's the mechanism? How is God great?
Well, somehow it works. It's like if you have a lock, I'm talking about a cellular lock.
Yep.
If you have a receptor site, we can call that a lock
Yeah.
because it's a specific receptor site. And if you have a key, like a specific phytonutrient or chemical, that can actually
Yeah.
fit in that receptor site and bond
Right.
to that. As you well know, cannabinoids, why do they work so well?
THC, it's receptor sites.
Cannabinoid system. Our bodies are hardwired to need those things.
Yeah, and it's a combination of receptor-mediated
Right.
and gene transcription
Exactly.
mediated.
The
CBD is more transcription mediated.
Yes.
THC is like the anandamide and the 2-AG. It's receptor mediated. So there's a combination.
That's the best
of these.
analogy that I can give in relation to Shisandra.
All right, rhodiola rosea. Why would you
Yeah.
ever use that?
Well, it's another big question. Why is because for literally thousands of years, people who live in the most exhaustive and difficult climates, when you're talking a
Right.
climate where the summer sun, it goes up and, it runs around all day long for a little bit of while, and then the earth tips the other way, and guess what?
And you get
got
no
a
sun.
long time of night. Now, what that does to people, I've seen it. I've went to
Yep.
Alaska back and
Circadian.
forth 5 times.
They're crazy there.
Oh my
I
God.
lived there 2
They
years.
will absolutely, and with the rhodiola, the cabin fever, we've all heard that term. Cabin,
Yeah.
what is cabin fever? Well, we won't go into that, but I will tell you this. When you don't have enough light, when your circadian rhythms are so having to adjust to such extremes in solar energy, the rhodiola, because it grows in these type of climates, and the animals and the natives there, everybody that lives there could not, I will say this, they could not enjoy the quality of life that they enjoy under those conditions without rhodiola. As modern people, what does that benefit to us? Hey, we're under stress. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but we've created a world that we have not adapted to, right? We need to adapt to the world we're in, and this really helps.
So rhodiola's adaptive capacity, we have a circadian rhythm capacity.
Absolutely.
Now, isn't it also used for altitude sickness?
Oh, absolutely. And let me tell you something. In Alaska, Denali, which is a very large mountain, and then also in the Talkeetnas, which are not nearly as
Yeah.
high, but up and down like crazy. The mountains there are such a draw. People go to Alaska just to get up there and test themselves against one of the most ferocious mountains on the planet. The Himalayas have higher absolute altitude, no doubt about it, 29,000 feet. But when you talk about mountain above sea level,
Yeah.
Denali is the
Yep.
big one. It's a
Yep.
puppy. And when you get up there, tree line in
Yeah.
Alaska is barely 2,000 feet. So you have 18,000 feet where trees can't even grow. Well,
But
guess
you got
what?
rhodiola.
Oh, rhodiola it's amazing where you can find this stuff. And as you start struggling your way through these biomes, as you work your way up, you start to notice some pretty crazy creatures. One of them that impressed the heck out of me, and you're going to laugh, is the crow. A cod-picking crow will pick your deer apart on the Cassin Ridge at 19,000 feet. A helicopter can't even fly there. A turbine
And the
helicopter.
crow's up there.
The crow with these little bitty black wings, the air is so thin, how do they get up there? They gotta flap like maniacs. And these little guys, all the animals, even if they don't eat the rhodiola directly, they're eating an animal that ate the rhodiola directly.
Gotcha.
So I'm telling you, they have adapted. Everything has adapted there. And so we need this same capability. And as a class of herbs, you and I are both on the same page here, but for our listeners, I will say this, that this is just my opinion here, but I will say this, there is nothing more important to include in your diet as a human being on this planet with the ever-changing stress capacities that we have to deal with. There's nothing more important to get into your daily regimen than this. This just blows my mind. And I tell you right now, I am going to take this back to the jungles, and I am going to show those people what we've done with their herbs. I want everybody in every biome to see this. They need to
Give it
know.
to 'em.
They need to know that they're valuable, that their knowledge is being
yeah.
utilized. I think it's very critical for us to bring it all together. Everything has to be a circle, Chris.
They do like to see those dumb white people do something
You
smart
know,
sometimes.
we need them and they need us. They need to keep those biomes intact. They need to keep those lifestyle and lives and cultures intact. And you and I, we think alike on this. And I really appreciate the opportunity to really discuss these things in such an open way. You know, this is not a cramped conversation. I mean, we're all over the map here, and I apologize.
We have to be all over the map.
Okay,
It's
all right.
the only way to do it.
It is.
All right, back on the map. Astragalus.
Okay, here you go. Has anybody ever heard of, you know, we all know, we probably have heard, there's these little bitty parts to our chromosomes called
Telomeres.
Telomeres, right? There's all kinds of research done on these things.
They cost $600 a month to work on, I heard.
Oh man, I'm telling you right now, you can buy formulas. We're not here to talk up or down about other formulas, but I will tell you this. There is an element called cycloestragonol that has been discovered in this herb. Now, all I'm going to tell you is this. From my understanding of herbs, and this has been many years of working with it, and I've actually seen scientific scholarly articles on this, the effects of using the whole astragalus, like you see in this slide, and
Whole root.
the whole
Everything that comes out of
phytochemical
it.
spectrum is in there. In my way of thinking, for us to think we know everything and just extract only one element, I find that a bit presumptive. And so what I have done here is I have done a very high concentration of the whole astragalus.
The whole root.
And there are articles, and I'm not going to quote them for you here, but there are articles that show the efficacy and the bioactivity that's achieved in the traditional ways of using astragalus equal what is being done with the latest isolates.
Excellent. Well, there we go. Whole plant. And so I use astragalus often for immune strengthening, especially innate immunity, the Th1 type immunity, interferon,
It's
ability
incredible.
to kill intracellular viruses. So I love seeing that go on here. But we have the same sort of adaptogenic properties
Absolutely,
in that?
absolutely. Astragalus is a powerful herb in traditional Chinese medicine.
Yep.
It's looked upon with great favor because it has such a whole body effect. It's not an herb that you use for just one thing to power something in or out of position. It's not like that. It really affects us all. And now that science, and you know, thank goodness for science with Quicksilver Scientific, absolutely. But science has looked into what's making this stuff tick. Now, true, they always want to look for the magic bullet, the silver bullet. You know, but you know, life isn't about silver bullets.
We're
It's
European, we can't help
yeah,
it.
we can't help it. But it really is about the effect. We need this effect. And in Mojo Nano, and I hope you don't mind that I'm really talking up what you've done here. But, I mean, I am overwhelmed. I mean, wherever whelm is, there's
You're overwhelming.
I don't even know where whelm is, but
Whelm was about here and you're up there.
we're really overwhelmed because my little studies that I've done with people, okay, knowing the baseline of my formula, mind you, which is the Sunhorse Adaptogenic Elixir, 3.3 milliliters per day.
Yeah.
Knowing that as a baseline and seeing what it's done. When I saw with my own eyes how Mojo Nano affected inflammation and circadian rhythms and sleep patterns, I couldn't believe it.
How quickly?
Oh my God. I mean, it is going to be, I don't think there will be anybody that puts their body through the kind of stresses that I've seen. Mona and I were at the Kona Ironman. We saw the world's elite athletes at in that regimen push themselves. I mean, actually, it was frightening what some of these guys push themselves way. You know, you have your baseline.
And did you give them NanoMojo?
Well, we didn't have NanoMojo.
Did you give them Mojo?
We gave them Mojo, but I will tell you this: that the adaptogenic, the athletes that availed themselves of the adaptogens, pre and post med checks, they recovered above their baseline. Whereas other athletes that were elite athletes, don't get me wrong, but they recovered. You know, they had the stress, they went through the competition, and they actually
crash, and then they come back.
They came in under their normal threshold. So now imagine you're an athlete with a repetitive cycle, right?
Because
and
they go
each
through a massive cortisol spike.
God.
Which creates a massive diminishment of the immune system. There's a big recovery, and the adrenals contract,
Oh.
and they go up, and they go down, and they come normal. And there you have the adaptogen stabilizing that whole flow. So,
Amazing.
all right, moving on to our next adaptogen, American ginseng. Oh, with the wrong picture.
That's
Well,
okay.
Just pretend that's American ginseng.
Okay, Panish quinquefolius, American ginseng. Now, think about this. American ginseng. Why do we call it American ginseng? Well, first of all, you have your Panish ginseng from Asia. But many, many years ago, back in the late 1600s, a Jesuit, I believe he was a Jesuit, I could be wrong, but a Jesuit who was up in Canada, who had also spent time in China, ran across, guess what? What looked to him, you know, being not a botanist, but just as a Jesuit, you know, monk, it looked to him like Panish ginseng.
Yeah.
So he basically started to look into it. He found out that the Indians, the indigenous peoples, used it exactly in the way that the Chinese indigenous peoples and their people would have used it. So guess what? You know, we've all heard of Daniel Boone, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Daniel Boone didn't make his money trapping furs. What he did he made his money with ginseng.
Ginseng trader.
Ginseng financed the revolution that created our country.
Oh, yeah.
American ginseng has been used by the Native American peoples, and I have studied these people. And let me tell you what, they traded it. It was actually almost a currency.
Yeah.
It was completely amazing. Now, the Chinese, when they found this got shipped over to China by the boatload. But what they found out, Chris, is that Panish quinquefolius, American ginseng, is a true gin tonic.
Right.
It has the ability to either bring up or bring down responses within the system. And that, see, is so important. It is an absolute balancer. And that's really important for us because as a lot of us are Anglo descent, a little hot-blooded. You're not hot-blooded, are you? I'm Hungarian and Irish, and I would never recommend. I would never recommend that. I'm not recommending Hungarian and Irish, but I would tell you one thing: we all know what hot-blooded is, and so if we if we take red or Asian ginseng,
it makes you a little over the top.
Yes, nobody that knows you well is going to want to be around you. Okay.
It's been witnessed.
Yeah, and it's a known fact. So the Chinese figured out that Panish quinquefolius was much more balanced in its effect. And that is why, I will tell you this, that American ginseng is bought, the whole crop, virtually the whole crop is bought every year. And Sunhorse has had to work very, very hard to make sure that we stabilize our supply of these, this, because it is super, super important in our formula. It's very important.
You know, that brings two things. One is sourcing the best materials, which I know you have taken years and years to do.
It's an endless job.
But I'd also like to just touch on, before we go on, the idea of tonics. So if we were speaking from a more traditional Chinese medicine perspective, we'd be talking about tonics. And in TCM, they talk about yin tonics, yang tonics, qi tonics, and jing tonics.
Right.
And jing is really the gold,
It's
the bubbling
superior.
spring.
Yeah, it's the superior herbs. They're classified into superior, medium, and base herbs. And the bottom line is this is a superior herb. And it is a jing tonic in that men or women or people of various constitutions or people with various physiological challenges can all benefit from American ginseng.
Yes, and well, the whole formula is really a jing tonic, and the idea of jing was the essence, that undifferentiated, hasn't become yin, hasn't become yang. It can easily become qi, but it's not yet. It's there to become everything at once.
Exactly, and it also supplies moisture. The thing that I can tell you for sure is that
it's not just hot and dry.
No, I do a lot of running in hills and hiking in hills, and Mona will tell you the same thing. But the bottom line is this, is that, you know, with these formulas that we have, you know, if I have a formula that to my body dries me out, you know, I can't even, I can't spit. I can't get one little spit going. I'm not going to go with that. You know, I don't like that because I wonder what that's doing to my system under stress. But I will tell you this, that this is a cooling, it's kind of moister, and it really helps your body feel lubricated, you know, when it's in our formula here. And when you take just a couple of squirts of Mojo and you go out, whatever your physical regimen is, whatever you do, I don't care if it's yoga, I don't care if it's martial arts, biking, hiking, climbing, whatever puts you, whatever floats your boat. Go do it, and do it with this, and you will be amazed. It's like
Yep.
amazing to how your body
Brings
actually
clarity to it.
and the moisture factor is phenomenal.
Well, here's another one that brings some moisture, and there we have Chris Killam, the medicine hunter, with a picture of him gathering some goji. Now, you told me that there's a big distinction between different grades of goji out
Yes, that's something that we have to take into account. With the formula NanoMojo has the finest medicinal grade gojis, which is Lycium barbarum. This is an amazing, Lycium, think of the word, it actually comes from a root word that is talking about wolves.
Oh.
Okay, like lupus.
Yeah, it was wolfberry.
Lupus, like
right.
wolfberry, right? It's
Yeah.
actually known as a wolfberry. And what people did was they noticed that wolves would eat these things. They ate a lot of them. Now, I don't know if you've ever been around wolves, but Alaska, they're notorious for this.
I used to travel with them in packs.
These things can travel. They can go. They are incredible creatures. There's something to really be admired about them. And they ate these things. People started to really, and also in Italy, not just Asia. I'm talking about Romulus and Remus, were raised by wolves, right? According to, that was the founding of Rome. So honestly, the Lycium barbarum, the goji, which if you get into the high altitudes, the goji changes. It becomes more purple. It's bigger. It's just so vibrant.
Purple.
Yeah, it's almost a purple. It's a reddish purple.
And that's where you get to superior class.
That's the superior class. It's the best
versus the cheaper stuff that's just sort of a good raisin.
It's 10 times more expensive than what we see in a classic health food store. We might buy, you might buy a half a pound.
Yeah.
It might cost you $10 or $8 or something like that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those. Those are very beneficial as a food.
Yeah.
But when you get to the medicine level, you really need that adaptogenic aspect of it that comes from the high level.
Right, because you read a lot of us have read Ron Teagarden's books on on tonic herbs, and you read all the beauty of what lychee does for you, and then you eat a couple of bags and you're underwhelmed.
Yeah, you don't want to be
underwhelmed. There's overwhelmed, and we don't want to be underwhelmed.
Not underwhelmed, and this is an uncompromising formula. On your level, from this collaboration is so uncompromising. I'm surprised I can sit next to you. We're so uncompromising.
In fact, next week we're going to talk about people who compromise heavily on their liposomes and what the differences of grades are. Because I'm starting to get really annoyed.
Yeah.
So that's going to be next month. Right. So, Chinese licorice. Are we just talking about licorice root in your average tea?
No, we're not. Now, I will tell you this. I have had people say, oh, licorice root, I won't take anything with licorice root. Well, why did people say
hypertension.
That? Right. And because they don't understand, first of all, number one, licorice root is not just licorice root.
Right.
There's a couple kinds of licorice root. You have your Glycyrrhiza glabra, which is pretty common, and then you have Glycyrrhiza urulensis. And the way that the Chinese use the urulensis, first of all, it is a superior herb. It is found in almost every single traditional Chinese medicine formula that you can find, because what it does is it just blends and makes everything work better.
It's a harmonizer.
Absolutely.
Harmonizes all things, opens up your meridians so that the energy can flow. The blockages of energy, if you start taking tonic herbs, if you don't have harmonization, you'll get a buildup somewhere in the meridian system, which, when we talk functional or German biological medicine, we're talking about blockages in the autonomics and the extracellular matrix, which is very similar to just saying blockages in the meridians. So this is Chinese ginseng known for harmonizing and not having the hypertensive effect.
Absolutely. And think about this. We have all these adaptogens here, right? And they all help us stay balanced and achieve harmony, but we even have an adaptogen for our adaptogens.
Yes.
We help our adaptogens get harmonized. So we leave no stone unturned here, folks.
Awesome. All right. Now we're getting to some of the, there's a base adaptogen form, and we will release this eventually in the nano form. It's called Ultimate Energy, and that was Dan's original formula. And then he diverged into a slightly more masculine and a slightly more feminine formula. The slightly more mojogenic formula would be the Mojo. And one of the things that differentiated it was this use of Bulgarian Tribulus terrestris, even though that says terrestric. This is Tribulus terrestris, and specifically from Dan's homeland.
Yeah, well, nearby. This is what we use in the Mojo Nano is Bulgarian tribulus. First of all, the studies, any studies that have shown benefit to tribulus, and there are many, and there are also many that show that that doesn't increase your hormone count, blood serum levels of testosterone or anything like that. There are studies that show it does not make you gain lean muscle mass or anything that's been attributed to. And then there are also studies that show that it does. So it does or it doesn't. Why would there be conflicting studies? Well, the difference is this, and this is the same with many herbs. Okay. They did the studies using Bulgarian tribulus, and there is a difference when things grow in a certain area and they have certain attributes. You need to go and use that same herb from that area.
That soil, that mineral composition there, that elevation, that humidity, that evokes the expression of specific gene sets to create specific proteins and biomolecules.
Exactly, and you mentioned, like you said, there are formulas that just like have a big old laundry list of herbs, blah blah blah. But we went to great lengths here to get this really the best for everybody, and that included going to the finest sources where the studies were actually done. And I can tell you right now that the Bulgarian tribulus has an incredible benefit for men, but it also equally has a benefit for women. And we are finding, and I'm not recommending this, folks, because the women's formula is not out yet, but I will tell you this, that women love Mojo Nano. As a matter of fact...
No, you are recommending that. Everybody
They love
take
it. They love it. But the thing is the Bulgarian tribulus has been shown in double-blind placebo-controlled tests to really affect women in a beneficial way on many levels. And so we go with where the research was and where the research is, and so we don't use some cheap substitute or from another place.
I was trying to get into using tribulus for a formula, and I couldn't find the Bulgarian. I found that research that said, no, it was all the Bulgarian.
Absolutely.
I couldn't get it, but you got it.
It's really tough.
Did you say horny goat weed?
Well, we could say goat weed, but why leave out such a beautiful word? Horny, I like to say the 3 H's, happy, healthy, and horny. I mean, in general. I mean, we're just saying in a general sense, because without our whole, human experience is a good thing, and we're not going to leave this out. I didn't name it horny goat weed.
No.
Somebody else did. But I like it because, epimedium is another one of those herbs that people were like watching. How did it get named horny goat weed? Well, pretty simple.
Goat herders watching their goats
eat
something and, get a little frisky.
Exactly. So they started eating this innocuous looking, piece of plant material.
Yeah, I mean, you can't tell that from anything else.
The top thing on the agenda was making little baby goats all of a sudden. So they're like, wow, that's weird. Goat eats this plant, want to make baby goats. And then probably some bright light decided, I wonder what would happen if I would eat this stuff. Well, guess what?
I think it happened pretty quick after this.
It might have happened quick. But I will say this. Now, epimedium in the horny goat weed, we're talking about something that is highly studied when it gets to the isolate, as in icarin.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about it very, very powerful and has incredible benefits. Now, we don't use strictly an isolate that is just a pharmaceutical style isolate.
I bought the Icarin, 90 and 98%. It doesn't really do anything.
You know why? Because they're leaving behind the phytochemical spectrum, which, Sunhorse and me in particular believe that those entourage is there for a reason. So what we do is we want a high level of icarin, but we also want a corresponding balanced amount of the whole phytochemical spectrum.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I had this stuff pure and it was like,
it doesn't work.
And then you gave me that pure extract.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Well, it's different. And it's very difficult to get people to work with you on this concept.
To get the extracts just right. Now, what do they call that in Chinese medicine? It's called a kidney gene tonic or a kidney yang tonic?
That's more of a men's type. It's in the men's formula, in the Mojo, which is designed as a men's formula. And it really does work.
It increases perfusion.
Absolutely.
And perfusion works for everybody.
It works.
Reishi.
Well, here you have now what they call immortality class Chinese medicine. You're getting to the elite level that now bacteria, they like sugars. They'll break down some sugars, right? You have to get to the mycological side of the world, the fungus, to break down cellulose.
Yeah.
You'll notice this is growing on a tree.
Only funguses break down cellulose.
Exactly. Now, what does it take to break down a tree? Think about that, and look at how powerful it. And you don't just take a bite of this.
Beautiful,
thing. It's like a chunk of wood. I mean, this stuff's amazing. This was such an expensive. This was reserved only for emperors at one time. It was so hard to get reishi that it was pretty much capital punishment for someone to go out and decimate the stock that was in the wild. It was reserved for the elite, for the ruling party of the ruling people back in the old days of China. But nowadays they've discovered how to grow it, and we don't just use them. We don't use mycelium only in ours. We only use the fruiting body, and I have found incredible benefits to reishi. Ganoderma lucidum. Lucidum means bright, like light, loose, right? And gano is like skin. So you're talking about glowing skin.
Yes.
So you're thinking about an herb that's an immortality class, the highest class in traditional Chinese.
And this was known not as just a qi or a jing tonic, but a shen tonic.
The limit, the ultimate.
Yep, the ultimate limit. Your spiritual light glows brighter.
Right, and when people experience NanoMojo, they are going to get some of the best effects possible because of where in the formula, I won't go into detail, but where in the formula this reishi and this Ganoderma lucidum resides in this formula, it's amazing. And just like we mentioned with the Glycyrrhiza urulensis, the reishi is in there in exactly the right amounts at exactly the right time. Every cook knows that you start out with ingredients as a cook, but it's not just putting them all together, it's when you put them together and how you apply the heat and what the timing is involved. And there's a difference between a master chef and somebody like myself that just might be able to make a nice healthy meal here. So, the same thing with herbs. We have to know where and when to put them into the resinous formulation. And that coupled with the Quicksilver technology, which has, by the way, and I'm not just going to say Quicksilver technology, I enjoy working with Chris so much because this man has a passion for herbs. I love seeing him after I haven't seen him for a while because he has so many interesting things that haven't hit the market yet, and I'll guarantee you, if they do, in the form that I've tested, watch out. So I'm so stoked.
The handwritten stuff, you all know about that.
Oh yeah, it's crazy good. And so the bottom line is that this formula has the reishi. The reishi's in there in the right amounts and the right effect.
And when I try to think about my experience with this, it really is one of a bright light. It's like a space opens up in front of me that's bright and clear. It's dry without being dry because it's not humid, but it's a bright, clear space that my mind and my body opens into. And part of that has got to be the reishi. And it's something I've never felt from the capsular forms and the simple extracts.
Really, you're absolutely correct.
All right, so I'm going to blow through a little bit of the nano part, and then we're going to talk about how we all take tons of this. All right, so the nano part, how do we get to NanoMojo? Well, we get to nano through dynamic, basically the phospholipid encapsulation. So we see there in the bottom right, the basic phospholipids. You got two fatty acid tails, the fat-soluble part, and then you got the phospho head, the hydrophilic or water-soluble part. You see those sheets of layered phospholipids all going together in the lipid bilayer where they've got water on the outside, water on the inside, and in that core they have that fatty core with those fatty tails come together. And I really like some of the language when you really get into using it. That each sheet is called a leaflet.
I love it.
A leaflet of the inner and outer leaflets of the membrane. And when you start to get into having this affection for these things, you'll start talking about leaflets.
I can kiss a little bird. They are unbelievable. I mean, they're delivering, the most amazing effects. I'm so impressed.
So it's this unilamellar liposome, this single shell there, and I should show pictures of what unilamellar and multilamellar look like, but multilamellar liposomes are when that phospholipid sheet comes together into a sphere, but when the phospholipids are blended in water in just a crude blending, they come like layers of an onion. There's the phospholipid layer, a water layer, a phospholipid bilayer, water layer, and we don't want those multiple layers. We want a single unilamellar. Lamellar is layer, a unilamellar, single bilayer sheet to make that sphere. And in some of these complex formulas, we're blending some other surfactants and some oils into that membrane to create the stability that we need to live in the face of this complex phytochemical environment.
It's amazing.
I mean, because it's, we think of, the nutrients all are on the inside. Well, it's not true. When you go to polyphenols, the polyphenols arrange on the surface of the membrane. They actually form hydrogen bonds around the phospholipid
interface there.
Right, and so they're actually part of the sphere. The nanoparticle is not just holding it inside. These phytochemicals are becoming parts of it. Some of them are going into the lipid, side of the membrane, the inner part of the membrane. Some are arranging around the outside. Some are getting caught inside.
Amazing.
And so it's all forming a sphere together. It's not that the sphere is separate from the phytochemicals in this kind of a formula. It's making a phytochemical phospholipid surfactant blended sphere.
And honestly, tell me this, I feel that the cell is probably one of the most incredible structures in the universe. But when it comes in contact with a unilamellar liposome and with this particular phospholipid, complete envelope, the cell recognizes it as a friendly structure. It actually goes into the cell, and the cell absorbs it. Yeah, I'm just
look at the picture on the screen here. Here's the liposome with its phospholipid layer coming in.
Oh my God!
Unifying with the membrane. The membrane then takes those phospholipids as food for its own being, for creating the fluidity and the harmony that's needed on those on that membrane in order to achieve transport in and transport out. And while doing that, it's delivering these nutrients either inside or so close to the cell that they get that cellular uptake that's so high, and that explains the incredible and dynamic and rapid effects that you're seeing. Dynamic is really what it is.
Absolutely.
So here we have a picture of the liposome on the left and that beautiful cellular membrane. And we all know that I like to talk a lot about membrane therapy and bringing the phospholipids as nutrition in for the cells so that they can live at a higher level. And if you've ever seen me talk before, liposomes, this isn't just from the nutraceutical world. In fact, the nutraceutical world is consistently doing a lower grade liposome, not what the pharmaceuticals are doing. We're doing pharmaceutical grade liposomes. We're throwing out a lot of the really nasty polymers that they use and keeping the bioresonant phospholipids and the bioresonant surfactants. But we're getting the size and the penetration that the pharmaceutical
the benefit that people are going to experience, and if you can get this, and I know you can get this from what we're talking about, the benefits are amazing. I mean, the speed, first of all, if you're titrating anything for that matter, if there's a long time frame involved before you feel it, isn't there a chance that you can over titrate or overdo yourself because you don't know how much actually
you can't take it back, as they say.
You can't take it back. And so with NanoMojo, I got to tell you, this is the fun part, guys. This is the fun part. You can be literally ready to wag out. I mean, the eyelids are shaking. You're trying to hang on, because we all get tired, right? And we do get tired. It's just, I don't care how healthy we are. It's just part of the human experience.
And you just titrate up.
Woo! I mean, you take one or two of it, and it's like, boom, you are moving out. And yet you can sleep like a baby.
Yeah, I've never had a sleep problem from
Not a stimulant.
So, it'll say out here twice a day, because we have to say something.
Yeah.
But if you're actually a professional in this world, you know that it's from once a day up to 10 4 times a day, depending on what you're trying to do and where you're at and what kind of effects you want to achieve. And so this is just more on oral transmucosal delivery, which is making the liposomes the size where you can actually get them delivered through the oral mucosa, and as you swallow, being delivered through the mucosas in the upper GI before you get really deep into and really damaging the molecule. You need fast absorption, or those particles are going to be damaged.
Absolutely.
And just to show you the influence of size on uptake, this was a study taking specifically tightly controlled sizing,
Okay.
putting a fluorescent molecule in them and watching them go across
Whoa.
CACO2 cell layers.
Amazing.
And so nothing gets into the cells with no liposomes.
Right.
You get this little bit in with the 236 nanometer liposomes. Now this is important. Most of the stuff you're getting in the nutraceutical world is 200 to 300 at best, and the worst stuff, the gels, are 400 to 600 nanometers. Here, you barely get anything in 236 nanometers. Go down to 97 nanometers, you have a 9-fold increase in
Wow.
uptake into the cell.
Could we
Now,
say size matters?
we could say size matters.
Okay, good.
And 97 is the high end of what we make. Go all the way down to 64 nanometers, you're a 34-fold higher, and at 50 nanometers, it's a 40-fold increase in uptake over the 200 nanometer.
Now, Chris,
And
is there
that's where we're hitting with the Mojo, down around 50.
isn't there an optimum where you start losing actual capacity at some point? I'm
Well,
wondering.
yeah, when it's an aqueous filled
Okay.
liposome,
Okay.
you don't want to go down much under 40, because
Okay.
then your theoretical minimum is 20, but
Okay.
your volume inside is very small.
Okay.
Now, if it's an oil core, you can go as small as you can, something
Okay.
like a cannabinoid.
Okay.
But this is actually a hybrid.
Right.
It's water core with a lot of fat holding capacity, so we shoot around 50 nanometers.
Nice.
And and we laser size all of this, and we can compare it to everything else on the market. And part of our specs is that it always hits at the same size, and that's how we keep everything stable and working the same way every
Amazing.
time. And just to show you uptake, just that these things really do in fact work. Here we have an example of using a competitor's sublingual, quote, sublingual B12, and this is their uptake in blue. You see nothing really happening until 60 to 120 minutes, right
Wow,
between
yeah,
there and
yeah.
there. Is that intraoral? Is that sublingual?
Well, I'll tell you right now, just you look at the time
60
frame.
to 120
Yeah,
minutes, that's not sublingual.
That's not. I mean,
That's
it's-
out of your GI tract.
Yeah, it's gone. I mean, it's already being broke down.
Whereas you see the liposome, and that's about a 50 nanometer liposome, shoot right off the baseline, and in 40 minutes, you're up about 60-70% of your max absorption. And over on the right is some of our more expanded data looking at 5-minute, 5, 20, and 40-minute points.
Wow.
Your 20% of your load is in 5 minutes. That's intraoral transmucosal
that's
delivery.
what you see. That's the fun part of this, is that you feel that. That is not, it's not
It
just
is
a
a
chart.
very
You can feel it.
experiential
I love
thing.
it. Oh, God,
And the
amazing.
practitioner should do this with their patients. Have them come in and say, look, I have not something for your disease, but something for your well-being. I want you to take it, and while we're here, I want you to feel it. And you have that experience with them. And then they're not going to buy this and get buyer's remorse. They're going to have this. They're going to demand that they get this from you. Same thing with the B12. Have them have the experience of it, and you'll have a much better relationship to them using it. One more uptake, and this is our CBD. This is becoming near
That's
legendary
impressive.
graph.
That's impressive.
On the bottom, you have the pharmaceutical, the published data set from the pharmaceutical GW Pharma Sativex, and you have, that's from 10 milligrams. So it's a slow uptake. It's starting to come up between 20 and 40 minutes, and then your max is really out here between 80 and 100 minutes. From us, we're coming right out of the gate. You got about 20% in 20 minutes, and then you're shooting right up. 40, 50 minutes, you're about 70% of your uptake, and then you have a peak riding in a little over an hour. And that's because you're getting a bunch of it in intraoral, and maybe half of it intraoral, the other half GI. So you have a big attack, and then the rest of it comes on. And the beauty here is we didn't do that with the same amount of CBD.
No.
We used half as much CBD as they did. That's
Yeah.
5 milligrams from our curve, 10 from theirs.
So it's really not dose dependent. It's more the delivery system. This is really proof of the efficacy of the delivery system, and it's not anywhere near dose dependent because you've used half as much as the lower element.
Absolutely. It
That's
was
crazy.
a 6-fold increase in bioavailability.
So do you start
off
all
of a
your
high
races like
bioavailability.
10 or 15 yards behind the start line?
We
or
do,
is it
just to
okay.
prove that we're
I'm
better.
just checking because
We don't want to be on the same
let's
playing field.
Call it a handicap.
All right, so we better switch. Oh my God, we have 1 minute to get it all in.
Oh my
So
God.
That's NanoMojo. It's the most exciting thing that's happened to us is in a long, long time. And until we do another formula together, then we'll have something just as exciting.
Can't wait.
So, what do we have to offer?
Well, we are doing exclusive pre-order pricing, so everyone who registered for the webinar will receive an email. Whether they're a practitioner or a consumer, they will receive 10% off of their respective pricing, and this is exclusive pre-order pricing. So be on the lookout for that email, and please buy away.
So, big question. What does pre-order mean? Does that mean it's coming in 4 months? No. Wait till you see the label. The label's coming in on wine bottle stock. It's going to have cold foil, silver and gold. I'm so excited about these gorgeous labels. Many thanks to Nadine Shade for the exquisite development of the design. Did she do good with that horse?
So amazing.
Oh my God. So, need to be said, there's a special die being cut in Chicago, and then it's on its way over here. So it's another 7-8 days until we have the labels, but the stuff is made, which means pre-order just means it's going to ship in 2 weeks.
Perfect.
All right, 10% off. I had a great time here with you, Dan. I look forward to doing more of these, and it's just been a pleasure.
Awesome.
So let's keep it going, and we're going to go fight later. Maybe I shouldn't do that. All right. Take care, everybody. It's been great having you here. I can't wait till you guys have NanoMojo and all the other herbal adaptogens that are going to come after it. You will never regret it once. Now, have a great time, and we will see you at our next webinar next month. We're tentatively July 6th. We're going to talk specifically about phospholipid encapsulation, what differentiates a liposome from a nanoemulsion, from a lipid nanoparticle, and we're going to talk about a lot of the drivel and hogwash that is following us around on the internet these days as people, thankfully, compare themselves to our liposomes. But it's getting hard and confusing out there as everybody says, oh, this is better, that's better, that's better. So we're going to take apart a whole bunch of products and say, well, are they really this size? Are they really stable? What really goes into all these products? And we're going to get some clarity into this whole business of lipid-based delivery. So thank you very much, and get some NanoMojo. We will see you next time. Same bat channel, same bat time. That's what my son would say. Goodbye.